Hello and welcome back to the channel where basically it's another top 10 where today I'm going to be counting down the top 10 movies that I watched for the very first time this year. So, unlike with my top 10 favorite movies of 2023, I did delve into like a lot of movies that I haven't seen. With the brand new series that I started this year called Tales from My Backlog. And, basically out of the over 100 movies that I watched this year, I know rookie numbers and that half of that was new movies that I have not seen. Now, nearly all of these do have reviews up on my channel, except for two. There are two that is on this list that I have not done a review for. So, with that being said, let's start off with number 10, Adventures in Game Chasing, released in 2022 by the YouTubers, The Game Chasers, Billy and Jay. So, why this movie? Out of all the movies that I could have picked, out of the 50, well, minus the 20 the movies that I've seen that came out this year. Why Adventures in Game Chasing? Well, because I had a lot of fun with this one. I knew going into it that um, it's going to be the exact same style and humor that I would expect if I was to watch a normal episode of The Game Chasers, just dialed up to 11 and with the bigger budget, and yes, it is similar to a lot of movies from the 80s, or similar to that, where people lament on their childhood when things were a lot easier and all of that, and they want to recapture some of that childhood nostalgia, which is what Billy does in the movie himself. His friend Jay, his other two friends, OK Chief and 8-Bit Eric, go on this massive road trip. It is again, it's a road trip movie. Similar and better have come about, but I've been a fan of the Game Chasers for years. They're what got me into collecting video games, and I still watch them religiously. And I just had a wonderful time with Adventures in Game Chasing. Even though I know a lot of people, it's not going to be their cup of tea. It was definitely, one of my favorite movies that I've watched of this year. So yeah, now let's move on to the ninth position. So number nine is going to be Die Hard. Yes, the movie that I had to do for my 400 subscriber special. The movie that for the longest time I swore I would never watch. I ended up watching, and I enjoyed it. It's a really good movie. Bruce Willis was absolutely amazing in it, and so was, of course, Alan Rickman. It was this movie that catapulted Alan Rickman as an actor. Prior to this, he wasn't, all that well known, and his role as Hans Gruber in this movie, you know, catapulted him into eventually, becoming Severus Snape in the Harry Potter series. And yeah, I'm glad that I finally got around to watching it. No, it is not a Christmas movie. Yes, it is set during Christmas Eve, but it's to me it's still not a Christmas movie. But I'm glad that I got around to watching it eventually. It was something that I just said off at random, that, oh, if you get me to 400 subscribers at the time, I'll watch it. And you guys did, and I kept to my end of the deal. And I watched it and I enjoyed it. Yeah. Um, I def like it. I'm definitely not gonna, go watch all the sequels that came after that. I'm happy enough leaving it at just watching the very first Die Hard. And like I said, Bruce Willis was absolutely amazing in it. The action, it gripped me from beginning to end. I didn't find myself getting bored at any of the scenes. I was completely engrossed into the story of Die Hard. And yeah, so Die Hard is my number nine. So, number eight is a movie that I watched and did not do a review for. Yes, it was one that I watched on my own time outside of, doing it for a review and that. And that movie is the Irish film The Field. Um, yeah, this movie is one of the best Irish movies I have ever seen. It has John Hurt. It has Richard Harris, which was the first movie outside of the first two Harry Potter films that I've seen anything got to do with Richard Harris in it. And Richard Harris as Bull McCabe was just absolutely amazing. It is a really, really, really good Irish movie about, Bull McCabe. He's renting this field off of this woman whose husband passed away. He basically poured his his heart and soul into this field, and then for her to basically go put it up for auction, and there's going to go to this American guy, and just the whole series of events that unfolded afterwards, especially with his son, who was played by Sean Bean. The field is just honestly really, really underrated, and I'm really glad that I watched it. And it was basically a blind watch. I knew nothing of it. I seen it out. I saw that it was, Richard Harris was in it, and it had John Hurt. I was like, okay, I like these two. Uh, Let me give it a shot. And John Hurt again, absolutely amazing. I'm delving into more of John Hurt stuff this year outside of obviously watching him in the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who, and in Harry Potter as well. So yeah, my number 8 goes to The Field. So I highly recommend it. So number 7 is kind of a little cheap. Number 7, I'm giving it to AI, artificial intelligence. Now, why do I say it's a little bit of a cheat? Well, you see, I seen some of it when I was a kid. I told the story when I done my review for it at the very beginning of this year. After being on Playtendo Guy stream, when I finally discovered the name of the film, and went out and got a copy of it. Literally the next day after that live stream, and because when I was a kid, there was 3 movies on RTE that I remember, two of which I remember the name. The first one obviously being Bicentennial Man, one of Robin Williams' most underrated films that he's done. The other one, of course, being The Fifth Element. And then AI, artificial intelligence. And I went years and years and years without knowing the name. Um, until that stream, and then after that, and after I built this media room, it was the one of the early movies that I actually watched in this room, this media room, not long after I built it. And so that's brought new sentimentality feelings towards this movie. And as a Kubrick slash Spielberg film, it's really, really good. I really, really enjoyed it. There's definitely scenes that are really, really creepy, and stuff, but I still thoroughly enjoyed it. Being able to finally watch it from beginning to end, and as I was watching it, I was starting to remember stuff. Like, oh yeah, I definitely remember this scene as a kid, and I was like, I don't remember this and that. Because again, I was watching it on RTE where there was ad breaks, and it was probably an edited down version as well. Because there was probably some stuff that they just couldn't show back in the early 2000s when I watched it. So yeah, um, number 7 is AI, artificial intelligence. So number 6 is another movie that I watched in my spare time, and I did not do a movie review for, and that is the Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks movie based on true events, Catch Me If You Can. Now, this movie has been on my radar for the longest time because I kept getting clips of it on Facebook, and then it translated to being over on TikTok as well. But it's one that I had on my back burner, and then just one day I was like, I kind of feel like watching a movie, I kind of feel like watching Catch Me If You Can. And so I went out and I watched it and I instantly fell in love with it. It is one of the greatest Leonardo DiCaprio and Tom Hanks films out there. Like I again, like with Die Hard, I was engrossed in the story from beginning to end. Like I said, there were scenes that I had seen obviously through Facebook and TikTok, um, but I was still impressed by the scenes that I hadn't seen, and as I was watching it, essentially with fresh eyes, and I know it's Dan over at Ocean Reviews favorite film. So I'm really glad that I actually gave it a shot, and I can see why it's Dan's favorite film, because it's definitely one of my favorites that I've watched this year. Leonardo DiCaprio just done a fantastic job in this, and like I said, it's a film that is based off of true events, and the fact that this guy that it's based off of managed to not only run from the detective, but also managed to be a doctor for a while and uh, become a lawyer as well. It's all just, very interesting and such a great movie. And I'm really glad that I watched it. So, number five is V for Vendetta. Now, this has been a movie that has been on my radar for quite some time, where I've heard a lot of great things about it, and I'd seen like maybe one or two clips of it, but I was literally went in to V for Vendetta completely blind, and I've talked about this already, how Catch Me If You Can and Die Hard kept me engrossed for the entirety of the movie. That was again the same with V for Vendetta, and because I watched V for Vendetta before I watched Catch Me If You Can and Die Hard, so it was the first one that actually properly done that, and I was very impressed. Now, of course, I watched the Blu-ray version of the movie, and I was blown away. I loved the character of V and the fact that he was out for his vengeance, his vendetta against all those people who wronged him. I was constantly engrossed by the mystery behind him and the relationship that was forming with him and Evie. Obviously, Natalie Portman was fantastic in this movie. She's a really great actress. I loved her in Star Wars. I loved her in Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium. The Thor movies. I absolutely loved her in this. She was absolutely amazing in this. And of course, the other one was John Hurt. As I said, I've been slowly delving into his other work outside of Doctor Who and Harry Potter. This and The Field was the two movies that were the ones that I delved into. And as the Chancellor, he was amazing. He even though he wasn't in it that much, it was still really good. And I was like I said, I absolutely loved this film, and I'm glad that I finally got to knock it off of my backlog. And yeah, so let's move on to number four. So number four is the Lord of the Rings Fellowship of the Ring. Yes, I finally, for the very first time this year, watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy back when I was doing my set of trilogy reviews, where I would review three different trilogies. This was one of them because it was a first time watch for the entire trilogy. Now, how I watched the Lord of the Rings trilogy was on a Monday. I sat through the 3 hours of Fellowship, took a break, had to take a break, whilst watching it, and then the very next day I ended up watching both the Two Towers and the Return of the King back to back. Well, not necessarily back to back, but there was some leeway in time. But after watching the entirety of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I definitely think that Fellowship is my favorite. I love the world building that this movie sets up between Frodo, um, and just everyone, the lore behind the ring, which obviously is explored in the Hobbit book, and the three terrible Hobbit movies, which I have not watched. I probably won't watch. Um, and no, I did not watch the extended edition, the 4 hour extended edition. I when I was watching the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I that's something I did not want to do. I was heavily against it, and I'm still heavily against it. I think because there are massive Lord of the Rings fans that definitely will try and get new fans in to the series by making them watch the extended edition. And I think the fans that do that are going about it the wrong way. The way you get these fans in to the Lord of the Rings trilogy is get them to watch the theatrical cut. If they feel that they want to watch the extended edition with all the other additional scenes and all that, that's fine. But there's also going to be the fans like myself that watch the theatrical cut and feel that they don't need to watch the extended edition. At least for me, not for several years. It's a series that I'm glad that I watched, and it's like I said, with Fellowship, I absolutely loved it because I loved the world building. I loved how they introduced every character. That was going to essentially play like a massive pivotal role. But I also love the fact that we get to hear about Gollum and not see him. Gandalf the Grey says, "Oh, we're being followed by Gollum," but we don't see him until the Two Towers. But yeah, Sir Ian McKellen was fantastic as Gandalf the Wise and Gandalf the Grey, and I just loved everything about Fellowship. Like the Fellowship is how should be standard for how you world build these fantasy worlds to get people interested in them. So that is why Fellowship for me is the fourth best film that I watched this year. So, number three is the first Rocky film. Yes, I have delved into the Rocky franchise for the first time this year. I've watched the first three. Um, and out of the three that I have watched, I still think the first Rocky is the best. I loved one, I thought two was okay, and I loved three. But Rocky one just, is that bit better than Rocky three. And, it's what everyone says. It's the perfect underdog story, seeing Rocky, struggling, trying to, he's working for people in the mob and that, and he has the dream to become like this big professional boxer, but he's not really. He's only like doing the odd fight here. His coach, in the gym that he sometimes works at, just isn't happy with the fights that he's been taking. He could go pro if he put the time and effort into it, but he doesn't. It's also I enjoyed seeing the budding relationship between Rocky and his partner Adrian. And the fact that Apollo Creed just picked him at random to be like essentially a pity fight, just for charity. It wasn't going to mean anything, but to Rocky, that was his golden opportunity to prove himself. And he went the distance. Even though it was always going to be Apollo Creed that wins. The fact that Rocky managed to train so heavily and land a lot of good punches to the point where even in the next movie, Apollo's like, I want a rematch because he felt so done dirty with how much Rocky has managed to train and improve to the fact that he went toe to toe the world champion at that time and nearly won. He essentially nearly won. Technically, which it's whatever way you want to look at it. Rocky won in that one or Rocky didn't. But to me, out of the first three Rocky films that I've seen, I haven't seen Rocky 4 and Rocky Balboa, or haven't even delved into the Creed series yet. I still think the first Rocky is a timeless classic, and it's a movie that I'm really glad that I got around to watching this year. So now we're into the top two. And in number two, I gotta give it to Predator. Yes, the very first Predator film. Now, this one's also a kind of cheatsy doodles because I did see the ending to it years ago in my teens, but I never got around to watching it in full until this year, where I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And yeah, there's a reason why Predator is such a beloved franchise. It's because of this movie. You know, everyone in it was fucking amazing. Arnie was great. I loved every every scene of it. You know, again, it's another one that kept me engrossed. I loved the fact that we don't see the predator for the first half of the movie. You know, we see the look of the predator, you know, in the using X-ray vision and that whilst the predator is stalking them. It's not until like the first hour into the movie that's when the predator strikes, and that's when we start to, you know, it starts to pick off everyone else, and then it just, you know, it ends with just, you know, Arnie's character being the you know last one there. The fact that he realizes that if he covers himself in mud, that's going to trip the heat sensor, you know, that the predator relies on. You know, it's not going to show up as any body heat and that, and that's, you know, really really clever. And yeah, it's one of the greatest action movies, and it's a, you know, it's not a bad horror film as well. You know, and what I do love is the fact that on the Blu-ray edition of it, you know, it keeps the original effect of the camouflage that we see for the predator. You know, it was something that I could tell instantly that it was, you know, the original effect with how what most people would say would look shit. I still think it looks good, in my honest opinion. So yeah, Predator is number two. So what is my number one? Well, it's another Irish film, and that is Philomena. Uh, you know, no one's going to expect me to pick this film. It's a movie that I watched for the very first time that's been on my radar since last November. You know, last November I was on an Irish movie kick, um, where I watched, you know, rewatched The Snapper, watched The Van for the first time, watched The Guard, and I looked up, you know, what the best Irish films were, and on one of the lists, this movie was it. You know, because it's also, you know, based off of a true story that was written into a book about Philomena, and it blows a lid on just how shady the Catholic Church was in Ireland at that time. You know, the fact that they were so corrupt that, you know, these women that got pregnant would go to them for fear of being cast down into hell, and they'd end up, you know, giving up the child for adoption. They'd work their time off there. You know, they would of course go see their children and that, but then they would be sold off into adoption to these American families and families elsewhere. And that's what Philomena is. You know, she's finally admitting to that, you know, her son being her firstborn being adopted off, and trying to go and find him, and then, you know, learning as they find out more about him, you know, learning about the fact that he, you know, he was in politics, he was a Republican, he was gay, but the sad bit is that he died of HIV, and not only that, it's the fact that couple of years before Philomena decided to, you know, go look for her son, that he actually visited the same convent that he was adopted out of, which he wasn't even told where his mother was. They even said, lied to him, essentially saying, "Oh no, she doesn't want to know you," and or anything like that. And the fact that he was, you know, buried there so that maybe you know, Philomena would stumble upon him, and it was it's just a beautiful movie. It is definitely one of the best Irish movies that I've ever seen, and, you know, Jane Judi Dench was fantastic as Philomena, and yeah, Philomena is my favorite film that I've watched this year, outside of obviously the movies that came out in the year 2023. So that's going to wrap up this list. So yeah, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for watching for the entirety of the year 2023. And yeah, I look forward to seeing how things progress in 2024.